Chapter 9 talks about quadratic equations. Today we're talking about nonlinear functions that can be written in standard form as f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. In the past, you have always talked about different lines, and in this case, the line just goes straight up and down. Today what we're talking about is a parabola, and in that case, your line is going to be curved. It is nonlinear. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to start our equation. Our first equation is y equals 3x squared. Here, what I want to do is I want to start by making my graph. So I'm going to do my x and my y. And as a normal practice, I should always start with -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Anytime you do a quadratic equation, you want to have 5 different points that you're working with. What's next is for me just to plug everything in. So I have 3 times -2 squared. I need to square my -2 before I multiply by 3. So I do -2 squared, which would be 4, times 3 equals 12. Next I do 3 times -1 squared. That would give me -1 squared, which is 1, times 3 is 3. And then I do 3 times 0 squared. Well, 0 squared is 0 times 3 is also 0. 3 times 1 squared. 1 squared is 1 times 3 gives me 3. And 3 times 2 squared. 2 squared is 4 times 3 gives me 12. Next, I need to move to my graphing. So I need to graph my points. My first point is going to be your -2, 12. So I'm going to go over -2 up 12, which in my case is going to be off the graph. Then you're going to do -1, 3, plot that point, 0, 0, 1, 3, 2, 12. You'll see that I start to develop what is called a parabola. Now, this parabola can be drawn like that, and it's going to go ahead and fill everything in. Your domain and your range come next. Your domain and your range signify what are my x values, what are my y values. Your domain in this case is going to be all reals. And your range in this case is going to be positives. Okay, moving on. Now I have a little bit of a different equation because this is a binomial. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, and I'm going to set up my table. I'm going to do my x and my y, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So now I'm going to do -2 squared minus 5. Well, my -2 squared is going to give me 4, and 4 minus 5 equals a -1. I have -1 squared minus 5, and in this case, my -1 squared is going to be 1 minus 5, which gives me a -4. 0 squared minus 5 is going to give me a -5. And 1 squared minus 5 is going to give me a -4. 2 squared minus 5 is going to give me 4 minus 5, which equals a -1. You'll start to see that there's patterns that develop. Let's go ahead and graph this. -2, -1, -1, -4, 0, -5, 1, -4, 2, -1. Again, I'm going to go ahead and graph my parabola. And I can move from there. My domain is going to be your all reals. And my range is going to be, y is going to be everything greater, in this case, than -5. Okay, moving on, I've got another 2-step equation. This time it has a -2 up front. So I want to start by plugging in -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. -2 times -2 squared plus 1. Well, -2 squared is 4. Times a -2 now gives me a -8. Plus 1 gives me a -7. -2 times -1 squared plus 1. In this case, a -1 squared is 1 times a -2 is a -2 plus 1 is a -1. -2 times 0 squared plus 1 equals 0 squared is 0 times a -2 is 0 plus 1 is 1. And -2 times 1 squared plus 1. Well, 1 squared is 1 times a -2 is -2 plus 1 is going to give me a -1. And then I've got my -2 times 2 squared plus 1, that would be 4 times a -2, which is -8 plus 1, which is a -7. Again, you should see a pattern. I'm going to graph now, and what you're going to see is your graph is probably a little off. In this case, we're going to go over -2, down -7. I'm going to go over -1, down -1. I'm going to go over 0, up 1, over 1, down 1, and over 2, down 7. Go ahead and graph your parabola in there. And my domain and range, my domain is all real. My range is going to be everything less than 1 because my line goes from here down, and it's going to be everything that is less than 1. So go ahead and fill that out. The next has a fraction, and from here, if you remember when you graphed linear equations, anytime you had a fraction, sometimes it's a little easier to use the denominator as a number that we graph on. So if I put in my x value and my y value, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use -4, -2, 0, 2, and 4. I'm still using 2 positives, 2 negatives, and a 0. And I'm still doing the same distance away, but in this case, I want to get rid of my fraction and not have to graph a fraction, so we're going to use it this way. So 1/4 times -4 squared. Well, -4 squared is going to be 16, and 16 times 1/4 is going to be 16 divided by 4, which is 4. And 4 minus 3 equals 1. Here I'm going to do 1/4 times -2 squared. In this case, -2 squared is 4, and 4 times 1/4 is 1. And 1 minus 3 is going to be a -2. 1/4 times 0 squared, well, that is 0 minus 3, which is a -3. And 1/4 times 2 squared minus 3, well, 2 squared is 4, times 1/4 is 1 minus 3, which again is -2, and you don't even have to do the last one because you know that that's going to be a positive 1. Let's go ahead and graph that, and we're going to have to go over -4 up 1, -2 down 2, over 0 down 3, over 2 down 2, and over 4 up 1. Graph your parabola. Okay, the last two have 3 steps. It is a trinomial here, and we're actually going to go over those in class because there's a couple of things I want you to add to them, and we are not quite ready to do the axis of symmetry and the vertex until we talk about them in class. So go from there, and we will see you in class on Monday.